The night didn't open with shouting. It opened with silence, the kind of silence that crushes your chest harder than any scream. My suitcases sat split open in the driveway, rain soaking through dresses I had folded with care. And there he was, my husband, laughing with a woman draped in Caribbean silks as if she owned the place. She touched his face like she was claiming territory, while I stood outside, shivering, wondering how a man I built a life with could erase me in a single evening. "Don't come back," he said from the balcony, his voice dripping with triumph. "She gives me everything you couldn't." What he didn't know, what he had never cared to ask, was that the woman he was throwing away like trash was sitting on an empire worth $800 million. And here's the thing about storms. They don't just wash things away. They reveal what's been buried beneath. This betrayal wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning. Before we get into this, tell me, where are you watching this from? Comment your city below. And if watching Leonard toss Claudia's belongings into the rain made you want to snatch that smug look off his face, then you'd better hit subscribe right now. And if you won't, then explain in the comments why not, because I'm listening. And there he was, Leonard Harris, my husband, my partner of 15 years, the man who once swore he'd die before he ever let me go. He stood on the balcony with a glass of something amber in his hand, leaning against the rail like he owned the night. And next to him, too close to be called a guest, too smug to be called anything but bold, was a woman draped in flowing Caribbean silks. Her earrings caught the porch light like fireflies, her laughter sharp enough to cut. Soraya Delgado. She leaned into him, fingers brushing his chest like she was claiming her prize, my life, my home. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I felt like I was drowning in the air. Leonard lifted his glass, not in greeting, but in dismissal. "Don't bother coming back, Claudia," he said. His voice carried through the rain, clear, triumphant, cruel. "She gives me everything you couldn't." I can't explain the weight of that moment. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to collapse into the wet street and let the storm swallow me whole. But what I did instead was stand still, perfectly still. My silence was the only power I had left in that instant, and I clung to it like a lifeline. Soraya smirked at me, one manicured hand sliding along his arm. "Go on, darling," she purred loud enough for me to hear. Tell her you've moved on." Moved on. Like I was a chapter in a book he'd finished reading, like I was a dish he'd already eaten, like I was furniture. I pressed my hands into my coat pockets, hiding the tremble in my fingers. "This is my house," I whispered, barely audible even to myself. But the rain carried it away, and no one on that balcony bothered to notice. Instead, Leonard tipped his glass, swallowed the last of his drink, and pulled Soraya closer. She laughed again, a cruel, triumphant laugh that didn't belong in a home I had built. The sound of it stayed with me long after I turned and walked away. People always imagine betrayal as loud, plates breaking, shouting, doors slamming. But sometimes betrayal is quiet. It's the rain dripping off your suitcase handles. It's the echo of your own shoes splashing through puddles while the man who vowed to love you doesn't even look down. I walked to the end of the street without looking back. My chest ached, but my eyes stayed dry. Tears felt like too much of a gift to give either of them. At the corner, I stopped. A streetlight flickered overhead, buzzing like it was trying to stay alive. And that was when it hit me. He really believed he had erased me. Leonard Harris, my husband, thought he had ended me with one declaration, one mistress, one night in the rain. He didn't know. He had never cared to know that Claudia Monroe had built something far bigger than him, that I carried an empire beneath my silence, $800 million. That number pressed against my ribs like a secret heartbeat. Money I had saved, invested, multiplied quietly over the years. Money he never asked about. Money I never offered. Money that waited like a sleeping lion, patient but powerful. Leonard thought tonight was my ending, but it was only my prologue. By the time I reached May Carter's porch, the rain had plastered my hair flat, my coat heavy on my shoulders. May opened the door before I could knock, her sharp eyes scanning me from head to toe. "Lord have mercy, Claudia," she said, ushering me in. "You look like the storm spit you out." I slipped inside, the warmth of her home wrapping around me like a quilt. The smell of cornbread and ginger tea filled the air, grounding me for the first time all night. "He threw me out," I said simply, standing in the middle of her living room like a ghost. May's lips tightened, but she didn't rush to console me. That was the thing about May. She never coddled. She told the truth. "That man always thought he was bigger than his britches," she muttered, guiding me toward the sofa. "Sit. Talk. Don't you dare go silent on me." I sank into the cushions, my body heavy, my hands finally betraying me with their trembling. He's with someone else," I whispered. May arched a brow. "And you're surprised?" "Child, men like Leonard don't cheat because of what you lack. They cheat because of what they lack. Don't you ever forget that." Her words cut, but they stitched me too. I leaned forward, my voice cracking for the first time. He told me she gives him everything I couldn't." May snorted. "Honey, the only thing that woman can give him is a lesson he won't be able to live down." She didn't know how right she was. I lay awake in May's guest room that night, listening to the rain drum against the window. My mind replayed the balcony scene again and again, every detail seared into memory. The tilt of his glass, the smugness in her smile, the way my dresses had looked plastered against the concrete. I should have cried. I should have screamed into the pillow. But instead, I stared into the dark and whispered to myself, "This isn't the end. This is the beginning." The next morning I sat at May's kitchen table, a cup of tea warming my hands. Vivian Scott, May's cousin and the neighborhood's unofficial gossip queen, had dropped by. She leaned in close, lowering her voice, though everyone knew she loved an audience. "Claudia, baby, I heard folks saw Leonard strutting through town with that Delgado woman last night. Bold as brass, like he had nothing to lose." May shot her a glare, but I raised a hand. "Let her talk." Vivian's eyes sparkled with mischief and pity all at once. "You know how one woman decided she could gain power by manipulating vulnerable elders? That's Soraya Delgado. She's been through town before. She leaves wreckage everywhere she goes. Men think they found treasure, but she's just fool's gold. Don't you worry, her shine won't last." I sipped my tea slowly, letting the heat burn my tongue. I thought of Leonard's smug face, of Soraya's laughter, of the way they both looked at me like I was disposable. "They think I'm finished," I said softly. May leaned forward, her eyes fierce. "Then prove them wrong." And right there, in that kitchen, with tea warming my throat and betrayal still raw in my chest, I decided. I wasn't going to fight Leonard for my place in his home. I wasn't going to beg for scraps of respect from a man who had already thrown me into the rain. No. I was going to remind Leonard Harris and Soraya Delgado exactly who Claudia Monroe was, and I was going to do it on my terms. Morning light always feels sharper after a night of betrayal. It didn't soothe me. It cut me open all over again. I woke in May Carter's guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of her old fan turning lazily overhead. For a moment, I almost convinced myself it had been a nightmare. The rain, the suitcases, Leonard's voice slicing through the night. But then I turned my head, saw my dresses folded neatly in a pile on the chair where May must have put them to dry, and the truth came rushing back. I sat up slowly, my body heavy with something worse than exhaustion. Heartache has a weight of its own. Downstairs, May was humming in the kitchen. The smell of bacon drifted through the air, mingling with coffee. I closed my eyes, letting it comfort me for half a second before guilt hit. I wasn't supposed to be here, not like this. I was supposed to be in my own kitchen, in my own home, sipping coffee while Leonard sat across from me, pretending to read the paper, pretending to love me. I pressed my palms against my face. How long had he been pretending? At the table, May slid a plate toward me. Eggs, bacon, biscuits, and more kindness than I deserved that morning. Vivian Scott was already perched in her usual spot, dressed too fine for 9 in the morning, a headscarf tied immaculately. "Well, good morning, Claudia," Vivian said, her tone syrupy sweet. "I hear the Harris house was lively last night." May shot her cousin a look sharp enough to slice bread, but Vivian never let a warning stop her tongue. "I saw Leonard in town earlier," she continued, "with her, strutting down Main Street like he just won a prize pig at the fair." I picked up my fork but didn't eat. The image burned in my mind. Leonard, proud, puffed up, Soraya at his side. My humiliation wasn't going to stay private. It was already walking down the street in daylight. "He doesn't waste time, does he?" Vivian muttered, leaning closer. "Folks are talking, saying Soraya Delgado has her claws in him deep, saying she's been flashing jewelry already, bragging about moving into your house." May slammed her coffee cup down. "Vivian!" But it was too late. The words had already sliced through me. Later that day, I found myself walking alone, no real destination, just trying to clear my head. But small towns don't let you heal quietly. They watch. They whisper. I passed 2 women outside the bakery, their voices dropping when they saw me. "That's her," one murmured. "Leonard's wife." "She looks calm," the other said, pity dripping in her tone. "I'd be tearing that man apart if it were me." I kept walking, my chin high, my insides twisting. Every glance felt like judgment. Every whisper felt like confirmation that I was the fool, the discarded wife, the woman who wasn't enough. But beneath the ache, something else stirred. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter but stronger. Resolve. They didn't know me. They didn't know what I carried. Leonard thought he had erased me. Soraya thought she had replaced me. But the truth was, I hadn't even revealed myself yet. That evening, back at May's, I sat at the kitchen table long after everyone else had gone to bed. The house was still. The only sound was the old clock ticking on the wall. I pulled a notebook from my bag, worn leather, pages filled with numbers, notes, plans, my secret, my salvation. Every investment I had ever made was listed there. Every dividend, every property, every quiet deal that Leonard had never bothered to ask about. $800 million. I traced the numbers with my finger, my chest tightening. To anyone else, it was just ink on paper. To me, it was proof. Proof that I wasn't small. Proof that I wasn't disposable. Proof that Leonard Harris had thrown out far more than he realized. I leaned back, whispering to myself, "He thinks I'm broken. He thinks I'm finished. Let him think it. For now." The rain outside tapped against the window, steady and relentless, like an echo of my heartbeat. 2 days later, the town got its show. I was walking to the post office when I saw them, Leonard and Soraya arm in arm, stepping out of a shiny new car he definitely couldn't afford. Soraya wore a dress that screamed for attention, bright orange with gold trim, her earrings swinging like wind chimes. She spotted me before he did. Her smile widened, slow and deliberate, like she had been waiting for this. "Well, if it isn't Claudia," she said, her accent lilting, sweet but sharp. "Out and about already? You're stronger than I thought." Leonard's eyes flicked to me, guilt flashing for a split second before arrogance smothered it. "Claudia," he said with mock surprise, "didn't expect to see you here." I forced my face to remain calm, my voice steady. "This is a small town, Leonard. You'll see me everywhere." Soraya laughed, looping her arm tighter around his. "Oh, don't worry, darling. We don't mind. Do we, Leo?" Leo. She had already given him a nickname. She had already made herself at home. People were watching from across the street, pretending not to. I felt their eyes on us, their curiosity prickling like heat against my skin. I smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides more than it shows. "Enjoy your day," I said, turning to leave. But Soraya couldn't resist one last cut. "Don't worry, sweetheart," she called after me. "I'll take good care of him, and the house." I didn't turn back, but my fists clenched in my pockets until my nails cut into my palms. That night, May sat across from me, her gaze sharp. You gonna let them humiliate you in broad daylight, Claudia? I exhaled slowly. Not yet. Timing matters, May. They think they've already won. That's the sweetest part. They don't even know the game hasn't started. She studied me for a long moment before nodding. Good. Just don't let bitterness eat you alive. You hear me? I nodded, but bitterness was already blooming in my chest, not enough to drown me, but enough to fuel me. The days blurred together, each one another performance by Leonard and Soraya. They drove around town in that car. They shopped with money he didn't have. She waved at people from my porch, my kitchen curtains fluttering behind her like trophies. Every display was meant to humiliate me. And it worked. But it also hardened me. Because every laugh, every whisper, every sideways glance was one more reason to hold my silence until the exact right moment. When I finally spoke, it wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be undeniable. And when that day came, Leonard Harris would wish he had left my clothes out in the rain and nothing more. There are betrayals you can hide behind closed doors. And then there are betrayals that walk out into the sunlight, smiling, daring the world to look away. Leonard Harris and Soraya Delgado weren't hiding anymore. By the end of that week, the two of them were parading through town like royalty. They weren't subtle. They didn't want to be. It wasn't just about love, if you could call it that. It was about spectacle. About making sure every pair of eyes saw them, judged me, pitied me. And in a small town, there's nothing more dangerous than pity. I first saw them together again outside the hardware store. Leonard had his arms slung around Soraya's shoulders, his laugh echoing a little too loud. She carried a bag of supplies like she owned the whole street. When she spotted me across the road, she stopped and smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile you give when you're happy. It was the kind of smile you give when you're winning. "Well, look who we have here," Soraya said, her voice bright enough to draw attention. "Claudia Monroe. Still keeping busy, I hope?" Leonard looked at me then, his grin faltering just a fraction before arrogance slid back into place. "Claudia," he said, nodding like I was a stranger he barely remembered. I didn't answer right away. My throat was tight, but my face didn't betray it. "I'm fine, thank you," I said evenly. Soraya's laughter cut the air. "Of course you are. Strong woman, isn't she, Leo? Out here walking, keeping her head up, when most women would have folded by now." The way she said it, like a compliment, but dipped in poison, made my skin crawl. People were watching, pretending to shop, pretending to read signs, but really watching. I felt their stares on my back like heat, like judgment. I could have walked away. I should have. But something inside me snapped. "This is still my town," I said quietly but firmly. "And some things don't change just because you drape them in silk." Soraya's smile flickered, just a little, but enough for me to see I'd struck a nerve. Leonard tugged her arm. "Come on, Soraya," he muttered. "We don't have time for this." But she pulled away, her chin high. "Oh, we have time. We always have time for honesty, don't we, Claudia?" The air between us thickened, and for a moment it felt like there were no onlookers, no cars, no street. Just the three of us locked in a battle none of us wanted to name. That night I walked the long road back to May's house with my hands shoved deep into my coat pockets. I thought of the way Soraya's eyes had glittered, the way Leonard had said my name like it belonged to someone he'd already buried. Anger burned hot in my chest, but beneath it was something else. Fear. Not fear of losing Leonard. I realized I had already lost him long before the rain-soaked night. No, it was fear of disappearing, of being erased, of waking up one day and finding that the world had accepted Soraya Delgado as Mrs. Harris, while Claudia Monroe faded into nothing more than whispers and pity. I stopped under a streetlight, the hum of it buzzing in my ears. "Not me," I whispered. "Not like this." A few days later, May insisted I go with her to the church social. "You can't keep hiding, Claudia," she said firmly, pressing a hand against mine. "If you don't show your face, folks will think you're ashamed, and you got nothing to be ashamed of." So I went. The fellowship hall was warm, filled with the smell of fried chicken and sweet potato pie. Laughter and conversation buzzed around me, but I felt like I was walking underwater. Every smile felt laced with pity. Every hug lingered too long. And then the door opened. Leonard walked in with Soraya on his arm. The room fell quiet for half a second, just enough for the tension to cut deep. Then conversations picked up again, louder than before, trying to cover the discomfort. Soraya was radiant in a dress the color of wine, her curls bouncing, her jewelry catching every light. She smiled as though the silence was a crown placed on her head. I felt May's hand slip into mine, grounding me. "Hold your chin up, baby," she whispered. Leonard scanned the room, and his gaze landed on me. For a moment, guilt flickered again, but Soraya tugged him forward, greeting people, laughing, making a show of herself. When they reached me, Soraya leaned in, her voice low enough only I could hear. "It's not enough to take a man, Claudia. You have to take his world too. And darling, that's exactly what I plan to do." Her perfume lingered in the air as she moved past, leaving me standing still, my heart pounding, my fists clenched. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was war. That night, back at May's, I pulled out my notebook again. The numbers glowed under the lamp like a secret waiting to be spoken. 800 million. The thought of it steadied me, not because of the money itself, but because of what it represented. I hadn't been foolish. I hadn't been small. I had been building quietly, while Leonard wasted himself on ego and show. And now, while he paraded with Soraya Delgado, laughing in my face, I had something they couldn't even imagine. Patience. Power. A story that wasn't finished. I closed the notebook gently and whispered into the quiet room. Let them laugh now. The storm hasn't even begun. If betrayal was a wound, then humiliation was the salt poured into it. And Soraya Delgado knew how to pour. By the third week, she was no longer simply Leonard's mistress. She was his shadow, his mouthpiece, his crown jewel. Wherever Leonard went, Soraya went. And wherever Soraya went, eyes followed. They didn't just walk through town anymore, they performed. One Saturday morning, I passed by the farmer's market. I wasn't there to shop. I didn't even have a list in hand. I just needed air, needed to prove to myself that I could still walk through my own streets without crumbling. But then I heard her laugh. Soraya was holding up a basket of peaches, pressing one against Leonard's mouth like it was a prize. "Taste it, baby," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sweet, just the way I like it." He bit into it, juice running down his chin. The crowd chuckled, embarrassed, but entertained. And then she spotted me. "Well, look who we have here," Soraya called out, her voice lilting, playful. "Claudia Monroe, darling, come taste this peach, May. Let's see if it's sweet enough for you." Gasps rippled through the market. People turned, their eyes darting between us. I froze, the air heavy in my lungs. My pride screamed at me to walk away, but my heart was steel. I stepped forward slowly, each click of my heel deliberate on the pavement. I didn't take the peach from her hand. I didn't even look at Leonard. I just looked at Soraya, straight into her eyes. And I smiled. Not the smile of a broken woman, the smile of someone holding a secret. "Enjoy it while it lasts," I said softly. "Sweet things rot fastest." Her smile faltered, just for a moment. But it was enough. I walked away without touching a single piece of fruit. And though the whispers followed me, I felt taller than I had in days. That evening, Leonard showed up at May's. He didn't knock gently. He banged on the door like he had the right to still be let in. May opened it, arms crossed. "What do you want, Leonard?" He shifted on the porch, his bravado slipping just a little. "I need to talk to Claudia." I came to the doorway, my arms folded across my chest. "Talk!" His eyes darted, searching, restless. "Why are you doing this? Why are you letting people think you're pitiful? You're making me look like the bad guy." I almost laughed, making him look like the bad guy, as if he hadn't tossed my belongings into the rain, as if he hadn't paraded Soraya in front of the whole town. "You don't need my help for that, Leonard," I said calmly. "You're doing just fine on your own." His jaw tightened. She makes me feel alive, Claudia. You don't understand. Alive? I cut in. Or controlled? His face hardened. You wouldn't get it. You never made me feel like this. May's voice snapped like a whip from behind me. Boy, get off this porch before I remind you what feeling alive really means. Leonard blinked, taken aback, then muttered something under his breath and stormed off into the night. I watched him go, my chest tight, my mind racing. For the first time I saw it clearly. Leonard wasn't leading this dance. Soraya was. The following Sunday, I made myself go to church. I needed strength, and strength doesn't just come from silence. Sometimes it comes from showing up where people expect you to be gone. Heads turned as I walked in. Some smiles were sympathetic. Others were sharp with curiosity. And then, like clockwork, Leonard and Soraya entered. She was radiant in white, her hand clasped firmly around his, as if she needed to remind the room he was hers now. When the choir began to sing, I closed my eyes, letting the music pour through me. The lyrics spoke of storms and survival, of faith carrying you when your legs cannot. I let the tears sting my eyes this time, not weakness, release. When the song ended, I opened my eyes to find Soraya watching me. Her smile was smug. But her eyes held something else, something uncertain. It struck me then. She wasn't just flaunting her place at Leonard's side, she was guarding it. That afternoon, Vivian Scott came knocking, her voice hushed, but her excitement barely contained. "Claudia, baby," she whispered, pulling me aside. "People are saying Soraya's already picking out curtains for your bedroom, telling folks she's gonna remodel the whole place." My chest clenched, but I forced my voice steady. "Let her." Vivian blinked. "Let her?" "Yes," I said, my lips curving faintly. "The higher she climbs, the harder she'll fall. And when she does, I'll still be standing." Vivian's eyes widened. "Lord, Claudia, you've got ice in your veins." I shook my head. "Not ice, fire. I'm just choosing when to burn." That night, I sat at May's kitchen table with my notebook again. The numbers stared back at me, steady, unchanging. They reminded me of who I was beneath the humiliation. 800 million. It wasn't just money. It was proof of my patience, proof of my foresight, proof that while Leonard thought he was the master of the game, I had been playing on a whole other board, and now Soraya Delgado thought she had won. But she hadn't seen anything yet. The final straw of that week came at the diner. I had stopped in for coffee, needing a small moment of normalcy. But of course they were there. Leonard and Soraya, seated in the corner booth, laughing too loud, drawing too much attention. When I walked past, Soraya leaned across the table and said sweetly, "Claudia, darling, don't be a stranger. You should come by the house sometime. See how we've made it our own." My stomach twisted, but I didn't let it show. I looked at her calmly and said, "Houses don't make homes, Soraya. People do, and you'll never own what you don't understand." The diner went quiet for a moment, the weight of my words sinking in. Soraya's smile froze. Leonard shifted uncomfortably. I paid for my coffee and left, my chin high. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a spark, and sometimes sparks are all you need to start a fire. The first rule of survival is simple: don't vanish. So I stopped vanishing. It started small. A trip to the library, a visit to the bank, picking up flowers from the corner stand, chatting with the woman who sold them as if my world hadn't collapsed. Every time I stepped outside, people looked at me differently, some with pity, some with curiosity, a few with admiration they tried to hide. But I held my head high, not because I didn't feel broken, but because broken things can still shine in the light. One afternoon, I walked into the community center where the church held food drives. Folks fell quiet for a beat before their voices picked back up, louder than before. I made my way to the back table, offering to help pack boxes. "Claudia?" Mrs. Jenkins, one of the elders, blinked at me. "Didn't expect to see you here today." "Why not?" I asked, slipping cans into a box. "I still got 2 hands." Her eyes softened, and in that moment I knew what they saw. Not a discarded wife, not a broken woman. They saw someone showing up when she had every reason to stay hidden. It was a small act, but small acts ripple. By the end of the week, whispers shifted. Not just about Leonard and Soraya's flaunting, but about me. "She hasn't crumbled," I overheard one woman say at the grocer's. "She looks stronger than ever," another replied. "Maybe Leonard made a mistake." I didn't interrupt. I just let the words trail behind me like a new kind of armor. Of course, Soraya noticed. She always noticed. The first sign was the luncheon at the Women's Guild. I hadn't planned to attend. The thought of sitting in a room full of watchful eyes made my skin crawl. But May insisted. "You don't win wars by staying off the battlefield, Claudia," she said, shoving a hat into my hands. So I went. When I entered the hall, conversations dimmed. I walked slowly to an empty seat near the front, my back straight, my face calm. And then Soraya swept in. Her dress was emerald green, her lipstick sharp as blood. She didn't even hesitate. She walked straight to the seat beside me, as if daring me to flinch. "Well," she said brightly, "isn't this cozy?" I turned my head, met her gaze, and smiled just enough to unsettle. Cozy for some, crowded for others. A few women coughed into their napkins, hiding laughter. Soraya's smile stiffened, but she recovered quickly. "You know, Claudia, people admire strength. It's impressive the way you still show up. I'd have thought you'd retreat." "Retreat?" I tilted my head. "Why retreat when you're already on home ground?" The table went silent. Even the clinking of silverware paused. And for the first time, Soraya blinked. Later, in the restroom, she cornered me. No audience, no pretense. "You think showing your face makes you strong?" she hissed, her accent sharper when the sweetness dropped. "It makes you pathetic. Everyone sees you're desperate." I leaned against the sink, calm. "Desperate? No, Soraya. You mistake silence for desperation. But silence is just patience." Her nostrils flared, her hands curling into fists. "Leonard is mine now. Accept it." I straightened, meeting her eye. "Darling, you can't own what doesn't even belong to itself." Her hand twitched, like she wanted to slap me, but she didn't. She spun on her heel and stormed out, and I stayed, watching her reflection fade from the mirror. For the first time since the rain-soaked night, I smiled at my own reflection. It wasn't victory yet, but it was power. Leonard noticed too. One evening, he showed up again, alone this time. His eyes darted like a man who had lost his footing. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he said, pacing May's porch. "Parading around, making me look like a fool." I crossed my arms. "I don't have to make you look like a fool, Leonard. You do that all by yourself." He stopped, his face tightening. "You've changed." "No," I said. "I've stopped hiding." The silence stretched, heavy. Finally, he muttered, "Soraya says—" "Stop right there," I cut in. "If every sentence out of your mouth begins with Soraya says, then you've already lost yourself." His eyes flickered, wounded, before hardening again. "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. I just closed the door in his face. That week, I found myself speaking at the food drive. May had shoved me forward when the organizer asked for volunteers to share a few words. I stood in front of the crowd, my palms damp, my heart racing. But then I remembered Soraya's sneer, Leonard's arrogance, and the whispers that had followed me. So I spoke. "I know what it feels like to be humiliated," I began, my voice trembling at first. "To be told you're nothing. To be left standing in the rain while people laugh at your pain." The room stilled. "But I also know this. Rain doesn't wash you away. It reveals what's underneath. And sometimes storms don't destroy. They uncover." When I stepped down, the applause wasn't loud, but it was steady, real, and I saw it in their eyes. They weren't just pitying me anymore. They were respecting me. By the time I walked home that night, I felt different. Not fixed, not healed, but alive. And that terrified Soraya Delgado more than anything else. Strength has a sound. It isn't thunder. It isn't applause. It's silence that doesn't bend. And that silence was starting to spread. The week after the luncheon, people treated me differently. When I walked into the grocer's, the cashier met my eyes instead of lowering hers. At the post office, Mr. Daniels tipped his hat and said, "Good to see you, Mrs. Monroe." Mrs. Monroe. Not Leonard's wife. Not the discarded woman. Me. Word travels fast in small towns, and word was traveling. Claudia Monroe wasn't broken. And that word was more dangerous to Soraya Delgado than anything else. She showed up at the community center one Thursday afternoon, strutting in with a basket of pastries like she was delivering salvation. "Oh, Claudia," she sang out, her accent thick and sweet. "I thought I'd come help today. After all, we women must support each other, no?" Her smile was all teeth. I didn't flinch. "Then grab a box," I said coolly, nodding toward the stacks of cans. The room fell quiet for a beat before a few chuckles broke the tension. Soraya's smile froze, her painted lips twitching before she set down her basket a little too hard. As she packed boxes beside me, she leaned close, her whisper sharp as a blade. "Enjoy your little charity show. Leonard belongs to me now. You can't take that away." I placed another can in the box, steady, unhurried. "You keep talking like you're trying to convince yourself, Soraya. Funny thing about belonging, some cages are dressed up to look like palaces." Her hand stilled, knuckles white. She didn't reply. And for the first time, I saw it. Fear, just a flicker, but real. Leonard, meanwhile, wasn't wearing his confidence as easily as before. I saw him outside the hardware store a few days later, his shirt rumpled, his hair unkempt. He was buying supplies he didn't need, avoiding eye contact. When he finally spotted me, his face flushed. "Claudia," he muttered. "How have you been?" I tilted my head. "Why do you care?" He shifted, restless. I just thought—" "You thought I'd be gone by now," I finished for him. He swallowed hard, shame flickering before anger smothered it. "You always twist things." "No, Leonard," I said quietly. "I just see them clearly." I walked away before he could answer, leaving him staring after me, his jaw clenched. Soraya doubled down. She began showing up at places she never used to, the church, the bakery, even the town meetings. Always dressed to impress, always holding Leonard's hand too tightly, always making sure people saw her. But people weren't looking at her the way they used to. They were watching me, and she knew it. The breaking point came at the diner. I was sitting with May and Vivian sipping coffee when Soraya marched in with Leonard at her side. The room went tense, conversations faltering. She strutted straight to our table, her heels clicking sharp against the floor. "Well, isn't this a cozy little gathering?" she said, her smile too wide. "Claudia, I do hope you're finding ways to keep yourself busy." May's eyes narrowed, but I laid a hand on her arm before she could speak. I looked up at Soraya, calm as stone. "Busy enough," I said, "but not so busy that I don't notice desperation when I see it." The room went silent. Soraya's nostrils flared, her grip tightening on Leonard's arm. "Desperation? Darling, I'm the one with the man, the house, the life." I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee slowly before answering. "Then why are you standing here, Soraya, trying so hard to convince me?" The silence that followed was deafening. Even Leonard looked startled. Soraya's smile cracked. For the first time, the mask slipped. Her eyes burned, her lips trembled, and she yanked Leonard toward the door. He followed, but not without glancing back. And in that glance, I saw it. Doubt. Later that night, May leaned across her kitchen table, her eyes sharp. "You shook her today, Claudia. I saw it in her face. But don't think she's done. Women like Soraya don't back down easy. They fight dirty." "I know," I said, closing my notebook. The numbers glowed on the page, steady and unchanging. "That's why I'm not fighting her. I'm outlasting her." May smiled faintly. "And Leonard?" I paused, staring out the window into the night. "Leonard's already out of the fight. He just doesn't know it yet." By the end of that month, whispers had shifted completely. No one pitied me anymore. Some admired me, others feared me, but no one dismissed me. And Soraya Delgado? She was unraveling, thread by thread, Some battles are chosen, others are handed to you. I hadn't planned to see them again so soon, but fate, or maybe just this small town's hunger for drama, had other plans. The church was holding a fundraiser for the local school. Everyone who was anyone would be there. May insisted I go. "You need to be seen, Claudia," she said, pressing a hat into my hands. "Not hiding, not shrinking, seen." So I went. The fellowship hall was lit with strings of white lights, tables lined with pies and casseroles, children darting between grown-ups. Laughter filled the air, but beneath it buzzed a current of tension. Because when Leonard Harris walked in with Soraya Delgado on his arm, the whole room shifted. Soraya was dazzling, of course. A dress the color of midnight, gold bangles clinking on her wrists, a smile wide enough to claim territory. Leonard trailed beside her, looking polished but stiff, his eyes scanning the room too quickly, as if searching for safety. When their gaze landed on me, Soraya's smile sharpened. "Claudia," she said sweetly, dragging Leonard toward me. "How wonderful to see you here. Still finding ways to keep busy, I see." May's hand brushed mine under the table, grounding me. I stood slowly, my face calm, my voice steady. "It's good to be out among friends." The word friends lingered, heavy. And several women nearby nodded, their eyes flicking between me and Soraya. Soraya's smile twitched. We ended up at the same table, because of course we did. The committee had assigned seats, and the universe seemed intent on testing me. I sat across from Leonard, who fidgeted with his silverware, and beside Soraya, who leaned back like a queen surveying her throne. The dinner began, chatter rising around us. I focused on the children running by, the clatter of dishes, the smell of fried chicken and sweet potatoes, anything but the woman at my side. But Soraya didn't do silence. "So, Claudia," she said loudly, ensuring others could hear, "what have you been up to these days? I imagine it must be hard, starting over." A hush fell near our table. People leaned in without meaning to. I turned my head slowly, meeting her gaze. "Starting over isn't hard, Soraya. Staying the same is." A murmur of approval rippled through the table. Soraya's jaw tightened, though her smile remained plastered on. Leonard cleared his throat, his voice low. "Maybe we should keep things civil." I tilted my head. "Civil is all I've been." The table fell silent again. Later, during the auction, I moved to the back of the room, grateful for a little distance. I was scanning the silent auction sheets when I felt someone step beside me. "Claudia," a voice said softly. I turned. It was Lorraine Price, one of the town's most respected attorneys. She was elegant in a navy suit, her eyes kind but sharp. "You held yourself with dignity tonight," she said. "Not many could." "Dignity doesn't always feel like much," I admitted. "It's more than you think," she replied. Then, after a pause, "If you ever need legal advice, my door is open." I blinked, startled by the offer. "Why me?" Her smile was faint. "Because I know strength when I see it, and because women like Soraya don't fight fair." Her words sank deep. She didn't know about my notebook, my empire, but she saw something in me worth standing beside. For the first time in weeks, I felt less alone. Meanwhile, Soraya was unraveling. I caught glimpses of her through the night, her laugh a little too sharp, her hand gripping Leonard's arm too tight. At one point, she leaned in to whisper something, and his face tightened with discomfort. Later, as people were leaving, I passed them in the hall. Soraya's voice carried, low and furious. "You're not paying attention to me, Leonard. You're distracted. Every time she walks into a room, you—" He cut her off. "You're imagining things." But his voice lacked conviction. And hers? Hers was trembling with something she couldn't hide anymore. Fear. That night, back at May's, I sat on the porch with her and Vivian. The cicadas hummed in the dark, the air thick with summer heat. "You shook her tonight," Vivian said, sipping her sweet tea. "She was clinging to that man like a lifeline." May nodded. "And Leonard?" "He looked like a man drowning." I leaned back, staring at the stars. They think I'm playing a game, but I'm not. I'm just standing still. They're the ones running in circles. May patted my hand. Sometimes standing still is the loudest move you can make. And she was right, because by the end of that week, the whispers in town had shifted again. Not just about Leonard's affair, not just about Soraya's arrogance, but about me. Claudia Monroe, the woman who wouldn't disappear. And that realization rattled Soraya Delgado more than anything else. The fundraiser was only the beginning. By the following week, I was asked to help with the school's supply drive. It was tradition. Every summer, parents and neighbors pitched in to gather books, pencils, and backpacks. I had volunteered for years, and despite everything, I wasn't about to stop. But when I walked into the gymnasium that Saturday morning, I froze. There she was, Soraya Delgado, standing in the middle of the room, clipboard in hand, barking orders like she'd been running this town for decades. Leonard hovered in the corner, his smile strained, his hands shoved into his pockets. The room buzzed with her energy, but it wasn't admiration. It was tolerance. People listened because they had to, not because they wanted to. When Soraya spotted me, her face lit with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Claudia," she sang, her accent thick. "Come to join us? How wonderful!" My fingers itched, but I forced calm into my voice. "Of course, I always help at the drive." Her smile twitched, but she gestured toward the tables. "Then let's work together. 2 women, 1 cause. Isn't that beautiful?" I took a breath, squared my shoulders, and walked straight to her table. If it was war she wanted, it was war she'd get, but not the kind she expected. We spent the next hour side by side, folding shirts, stacking books. Onlookers stole glances, the tension between us so thick it hung in the air like humidity. "Claudia," Soraya said sweetly at one point, her voice carrying across the table. "I do admire how you keep showing up. Not every woman could, after everything." I folded another shirt, my movements precise. "Showing up is what strong women do." Her lips twitched. "Yes. But sometimes strong women don't know when they've lost." I met her gaze. "And sometimes weak women don't know when they're borrowed, not chosen." The table went silent. A few volunteers coughed, others lowered their eyes to hide smirks. Soraya's hands trembled as she set down a stack of notebooks. Leonard shifted in the corner, his face pale, his jaw tight. At lunch break, I stepped outside for air. The sun blazed down, children's laughter echoing from the playground. May found me by the steps, carrying 2 bottles of water. "You handled her well," she said, handing me one. "I don't know," I murmured. "Feels like we're circling each other, waiting for the kill." May sipped her water, her eyes scanning the street. "Don't think of it as circling. Think of it as her unraveling. You're steady. She's shaking." I nodded, though my chest still felt tight. That evening, I walked into the diner for coffee and found Leonard sitting alone at the counter. No Soraya, no bravado. Just him, staring into a half-empty glass. He looked up when I approached, his eyes weary. "Claudia," I hesitated, then slid onto the stool beside him. "You look tired," I said softly. He let out a bitter laugh. "That woman doesn't stop. She talks, she spends, she demands. I can't—" He broke off, running a hand through his hair. "Why am I even telling you this?" "Because you know I'll listen," I said. He stared at me, his mouth opening, then closing again. Finally, he muttered, "I made a mistake." For a moment, silence stretched between us, heavy and raw, and then I stood, leaving a bill on the counter. "You didn't make a mistake, Leonard," I said quietly. "You made a choice, and now you're living with it." I walked out before he could reply, my heart pounding. Back at May's that night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook, the numbers glowing under the lamplight. 800 million. It wasn't revenge money. It wasn't survival money. It was possibility. And as Soraya clawed at Leonard, as Leonard crumbled under the weight of his choices, I realized something. I wasn't just waiting to rise. I was preparing to. And when the moment came, it wouldn't just shock them. It would shock the whole town. Here's the thing I want you to think about, before we even move to the next act. If the person you built your life with threw you out like trash, would you spend your energy fighting for scraps, or would you rise so high they couldn't even touch your shadow? Tell me in the comments what you would do. And if you wouldn't hit that subscribe button after following Claudia's fire so far, then at least tell us why in the comments. Because silence is just patience. The past has a way of knocking on your door just when you think you've shut it forever. For me, it came in the form of an old leather notebook. I found it buried in May's attic one night while helping her sort through boxes. Dust coated the cover, the pages yellowed at the edges. My handwriting, smaller, sharper, filled every line. I opened it and was transported back 20 years. Back when I was Claudia Monroe, the girl with nothing but a sharp mind and a refusal to stay small. The first entry was dated 2005. If I don't learn money, money will learn me. I will not spend my life begging for scraps. I will make the scraps feed me. I remembered writing that in a cramped apartment with peeling wallpaper, working 2 jobs and still barely affording groceries. That was the beginning. By day, I balanced checkbooks for strangers. By night, I taught myself markets, stocks, business law. I read until my eyes burned, until numbers became more familiar than people. And slowly, painfully, I built. One investment, one risk, one sleepless night at a time. Leonard never asked about it. Back then, he was content with paychecks and weekends at the bar. When I spoke about business, he laughed. "Claudia, you're always scribbling. Relax. Life's too short." He thought my notebooks were hobbies. He thought the meetings I slipped off to were errands. What he didn't know was that every meeting, every scribble, was another stone in the foundation of an empire. I didn't keep it from him out of malice. I kept it because he never cared enough to ask. As I sat in May's attic flipping through those old pages, I felt a pang of grief for the girl I used to be. The one who believed love was enough, who built a fortress but still left the door open for betrayal. "Claudia?" May's voice floated up the stairs. "You all right up there?" I wiped my eyes and closed the notebook. "I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. I was remembering. And remembering was dangerous. The next week, I went to the bank. Lorraine Price had given me her card at the fundraiser, and though I hadn't called her yet, her words lingered. Women like Soraya don't fight fair. So I sat across from the bank manager, calm and composed, while he slid documents across the desk. "Your accounts remain in excellent standing, Mrs. Monroe," he said. "Your investments continue to yield higher than average returns. You've positioned yourself quite wisely." I nodded, signing where he indicated. My hands didn't tremble. Not anymore. When I stepped back into the sunlight, notebook in my bag, I felt taller. 800 million, hidden in plain sight, and not one dime of it touched by Leonard Harris. But secrets have weight, and people sense weight even if they don't know what it is. At the next church service, Leonard sat 2 pews ahead of me with Soraya. He kept glancing over his shoulder, his brow furrowed, his jaw clenched. Later, in the parking lot, he cornered me. "You've been busy," he said, his voice low. I raised an eyebrow. "Busy?" "People talk, Claudia. They say you've been meeting with lawyers, bankers, that you're planning something." I smiled faintly. "Funny. When you left me on the porch, you didn't care what I planned." His eyes narrowed. "What are you hiding?" I leaned closer, my voice calm, but cutting. "The fact that you even ask that question tells me all I need to know. You never really knew me, Leonard. Not then, not now." He swallowed hard, but before he could reply, Soraya swept up, her heels clicking. "There you are," she snapped, grabbing his arm. Her eyes flicked to me, sharp and wary. "We're leaving." And just like that, he was gone. But the look on his face stayed with me. A man who was beginning to realize the ground beneath him wasn't solid after all. That night, I sat on May's porch with Vivian, the cicadas singing in the dark. "You're quiet," Vivian said. "I'm remembering," I admitted. Good memories? I shook my head. Necessary ones. She sipped her tea, watching me. Claudia, you ever think maybe God let that woman strut in your life just to remind you of what you already had? I thought about it. The weight of my fortune, the strength of my silence, the sting of betrayal. Maybe, I said softly, or maybe he let her in to remind me I don't need anyone's permission to rise. Vivian chuckled. Now that's the Claudia I know. The past wasn't finished with me yet, and neither was Soraya Delgado, because secrets, once stirred, have a way of demanding to be told. Whispers are a dangerous thing. They can crown you, or they can crush you, and lately the whispers weren't about me anymore. They were about Soraya Delgado. It started small. At the salon, I overheard two women murmuring, "She's always at the doctor's office." Again? That's the third time this month. Leonard looks tired. You think something's wrong? I didn't join in. I just sat in the chair, flipping through a magazine I wasn't reading. But my pulse quickened, because whispers never float without fire. A week later, I found myself face to face with Soraya at the grocer's. She looked paler than usual, her makeup heavier, her movements stiff. "Claudia," she said, her voice too bright. "Still lingering around town, I see." I studied her carefully. The hollowness under her eyes, the tension in her jaw, the way her hands shook ever so slightly as she held her basket. "You don't look well," I said softly. Her smile faltered. For a moment, just a moment, the mask slipped. Fear flickered in her gaze. Then she straightened, tossing her hair. "I'm perfectly fine. Better than ever." But her voice cracked on the last word. And I knew. Leonard knew too. He just didn't want to face it. I saw them outside the pharmacy a few days later. Soraya clutched a paper bag, her knuckles white, while Leonard argued with her in hushed tones. "You said this was nothing," he hissed. "You said, 'It is nothing,'" she snapped. "Stop making a scene." But his face told another story. A story of a man who had bet his life on a woman whose secrets were heavier than his pride. That night, May leaned across her kitchen table, her eyes sharp. "You've heard it too, haven't you?" she asked. I hesitated. "Heard what?" "That Soraya's sick. That she gave Leonard something he can't get rid of." The words landed like stones, heavy, unshakable. May continued, her voice low. "People say it started before she ever came here, a mistake in her past, a shadow she's been running from, and now it's caught up." I sat back, my chest tight. If that's true, May's eyes softened. If it's true, then maybe it's not just Leonard's life she's poisoning. Maybe it's her own. The infection wasn't confirmed, not then. But the tension in town thickened. People watched Soraya with wary eyes, their whispers sharper, their pity hidden behind forced smiles. And Leonard? Leonard looked like a man unraveling. At church, he fidgeted in the pew, his hand gripping the hymn book too tightly. At the diner, he sat alone more often, staring at his coffee like it held answers. And when Soraya wasn't around, his shoulders sagged with the weight of regret. But whenever she appeared, he straightened, plastered on a smile, and let her drag him along like a man chained. Meanwhile, I was no longer just surviving. I met with Lorraine Price again, this time in her office downtown. "You've built something extraordinary," she said, flipping through the files I'd shown her. 800 million, diversified, protected, invisible. Leonard doesn't have a clue, does he? "No," I said quietly. She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "Claudia, you're sitting on power most people only dream of. The question is, what do you want to do with it?" I swallowed hard. For so long, the fortune had been my secret shield. But now, with Soraya unraveling and Leonard stumbling, it felt less like a shield and more like a weapon waiting to be used. "I want," I said slowly, "to make sure that when the truth comes out, it doesn't just bruise them, it changes everything." Lorraine nodded, her smile faint but fierce. "Then it's time to prepare." That night, I stood on May's porch, notebook in hand, the cicadas singing in the dark. I thought about the girl I used to be, scribbling dreams in cheap notebooks. I thought about Leonard, blinded by pride. And I thought about Soraya, hiding behind jewels and smiles while her own body betrayed her. And I realized something. The past doesn't just haunt us, it reveals us. And Soraya Delgado's past was about to catch up with her faster than she could run. Secrets rot faster than fruit in the sun, and Soraya Delgado was starting to smell them. By midsummer, the whispers weren't whispers anymore. They were half-spoken truths hanging in the air wherever she went. She's at the clinic again. Leonard looks sickly, too. Don't let her touch the food, just in case. The town wasn't cruel, not exactly, but pity has teeth sharper than gossip. And Soraya was bleeding. I saw her at the pharmacy one afternoon. She was arguing with the pharmacist, her voice low but sharp. "I need the refill," she hissed. "I told you, Miss Delgado," the pharmacist said, keeping his tone calm. "You'll have to see the doctor first." Her shoulders sagged, her hand clutching the counter. "Please," she whispered. When she turned and spotted me standing near the entrance, her mask slammed back on. She tossed her hair, straightened her spine, and swept past me without a word. But her eyes told the truth. Fear. Leonard wasn't hiding it as well anymore. At church, he slumped in the pew, his face pale. At the diner, he pushed food around his plate, untouched. One evening, I overheard him arguing with Soraya outside May's fence. "You lied to me," he spat, his voice hoarse. "I didn't lie," Soraya snapped. "I protected you." "Protected me?" His laugh was bitter. "You've ruined me." The words hung in the air, thick and heavy. Then Soraya stormed off, her heels clicking like gunshots in the night. Leonard followed a moment later, but slower, like a man dragging chains. May stepped onto the porch beside me, arms crossed. "That man's drowning," she muttered. "And she's the water," I said. Meanwhile, I was rising. Quietly, steadily. Lorraine Price and I met weekly now. She was helping me restructure trusts, secure properties, expand investments. We spoke in hushed tones in her office, papers spread across her desk, the hum of the city below us. "You're building a kingdom, Claudia," she said one evening. "Not a kingdom," I corrected softly. "A shield, but maybe one day, a crown." Her smile was sharp. "Then wear it when the time is right." But power changes the way people look at you. At the food drive, volunteers greeted me warmly, eager to work by my side. At the diner, folks nodded as I passed, not with pity, but with respect. And Soraya? She saw it. Every smile I received was a thorn in her side. Every nod, every whispered, "Mrs. Monroe," was a reminder that I hadn't disappeared. She cornered me outside the church one Sunday, her lipstick smudged, her eyes wild. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "You think standing there smiling makes you better than me?" I studied her calmly. "I don't need to win, Soraya. I just need to outlast you." Her hands shook, her breath ragged. "He chose me." "Did he?" I asked softly. "Or did you trap him?" Her face went white, her lips trembling. For the first time, she couldn't answer. She just turned and fled, stumbling in her heels. That night, Leonard showed up at May's porch. He looked older, thinner, his eyes bloodshot. "Claudia," he said, his voice breaking. "You don't know what it's like." "Then tell me," I said. He sat heavily on the step, burying his face in his hands. "She's sick. She's been sick all along. And now I—" He broke off, his shoulders shaking. I sat beside him, silent. "I thought she was freedom," he whispered. "I thought she was life. But she's killing me, Claudia. She's killing us both." For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I placed a hand on his shoulder. "You made your bed, Leonard," I said quietly. "Now you have to decide whether you'll keep lying in it or finally stand up." He didn't answer. He just sat there, broken, the weight of his choices crushing him. And for the first time, I didn't feel pity. I felt clarity. Because Soraya Delgado's infection wasn't just in her body. It was in her lies, her manipulation, her need to control. And Leonard Harris? He had swallowed every drop of it. But I hadn't. And I never would. Some bonds don't break clean. They fray, they tangle, they haunt. And mine with Leonard Harris was no exception. It was late one evening when I heard the knock. May was already asleep, so I opened the door myself. There he was. Leonard. He looked worn, his shirt wrinkled, his shoulders slumped. Not the proud man who once strutted through this town with Soraya on his arm. This Leonard looked like he'd been hollowed out. "Claudia," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I hesitated, every instinct telling me to shut the door, but something in his eyes stopped me. 5 minutes, I said. He stepped inside, sitting stiffly at the kitchen table. For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy as stone. Finally, he spoke. "She's worse. Soraya. She won't admit it, but she's sick. Really sick." I folded my arms. "That's between you and her." He shook his head. "No, it's not. Because it's affecting me too. My health, my everything." I stared at him, my jaw tight. "You chose her, Leonard." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "God help me, I know. But Claudia..." He looked up, his eyes wet. "I don't even recognize my life anymore." For a moment I saw him, not the betrayer, not the fool, but the man I once knew, the man I married, the man I believed in, and it broke something in me I thought had hardened forever. But pity is a dangerous thing. I pushed back my chair, steadying my voice. "You're the one who walked away. Don't come crawling back now because your new world is crumbling." He flinched, but nodded. "You're right." He stood, his face shadowed. I wanted you to know." As he turned to leave, his eyes landed on the notebook sitting open on the counter. Numbers sprawled across the page. Investments, dates, projections. "What's that?" he asked. "Nothing," I said too quickly, sliding it shut. But suspicion flickered in his eyes. He didn't press, not then. But I knew he'd seen enough to wonder. Meanwhile, Soraya was spiraling. At the community meeting, she arrived late, her makeup heavy. Her smile brittle, she clung to Leonard's arm like a lifeline, interrupting conversations, speaking over others. When the pastor asked for volunteers to lead the youth program, Soraya jumped in before anyone else could answer. "I'll do it," she said, her voice too loud. The room fell silent. Finally, Mrs. Jenkins cleared her throat. "We appreciate your enthusiasm, Soraya, but perhaps Claudia, she's been with the program for years." The air shifted. All eyes turned to me. Soraya's smile froze. Her nails dug into Leonard's sleeve. "Of course," she said tightly. "Claudia should do it." The meeting moved on, but the damage was done. Soraya wasn't winning hearts anymore. She was losing them, one forced smile at a time. Later, I caught Leonard watching me as I spoke with a group of parents. His gaze wasn't bitter. It wasn't angry. It was something else. Regret. When Soraya tugged his arm, he followed reluctantly, his eyes lingering on me until the door shut behind them. That night, May poured tea for us both, her eyes sharp. "He's sniffing around again." "I noticed," I said, sipping slowly. "Don't let sympathy trip you, Claudia. A man like Leonard, he'll take any crack in your armor and crawl back in." "I know," I whispered. But the truth was, part of me didn't just see Leonard's weakness. I saw his pain, and pain has a way of speaking to old wounds. May leaned closer. "You've got more power than you admit, baby. Not just the money, the dignity. Don't let him strip that away." I nodded, gripping my cup tighter. The following week, I visited Lorraine again. She spread papers across her desk, tapping one neatly manicured finger against the figures. "Your holdings are growing faster than expected. You've got leverage here, Claudia. Serious leverage." "Leverage for what?" I asked. Her eyes gleamed. "For when the time comes to show him what he lost. Men like Leonard don't learn from whispers. They learn from earthquakes." I thought of Leonard's eyes on my notebook, the suspicion in his voice. "Maybe," I said softly. "The earthquake is already rumbling." That evening, as I walked back through town, I passed Leonard and Soraya on the street. They were arguing, her voice sharp, his voice low and angry. "You can't keep this from me," he hissed. "You wouldn't understand," she snapped. "You never do." When they saw me, Soraya's face twisted. "Out enjoying yourself again, Claudia?" she sneered. I met her gaze calmly. "At least I don't have to fake it." Leonard flinched. Soraya's nostrils flared, and I walked on, leaving them in the dust of their unraveling world. The bond between Leonard and me wasn't healed, but it wasn't severed either. It was something in between, raw, messy, unresolved. And in that tension, seeds were sprouting, seeds of truth, seeds of suspicion, because Leonard Harris was finally beginning to realize that Claudia Monroe wasn't powerless, and he had no idea how much that realization was going to cost him. Life has a way of forcing people together when they least want it. For me and Leonard, that moment came on a hot Saturday afternoon at the community picnic. I hadn't planned on going, but May pushed me. "You can't disappear every time he's around," she said, pinning a sunflower brooch to my dress. "Besides, the town's watching. Show them you're unshaken." So I went. The park was buzzing with laughter, children chasing each other, smoke curling from barbecue pits. I found myself at the dessert table, cutting slices of pie, when a familiar voice spoke behind me. "Need a hand?" I turned. Leonard stood there holding paper plates. I stiffened. "I'm fine." But the organizer bustled over, smiling brightly. "Perfect! You two can serve together." And just like that, we were side by side, passing out pie slices to neighbors who kept sneaking glances at us like we were part of the entertainment. For the first few minutes, we worked in silence. Leonard handed plates, I added pie. Neither of us looking at the other. Finally, he spoke. "You always did like this part, helping, talking with folks." I didn't answer. "You're good at it," he added quietly. I slid another slice onto a plate, my voice steady. "You never noticed before." His hand faltered. "I notice now." The words hung between us, heavy. After an hour, the crowd thinned. I stepped away to catch my breath, but Leonard followed. "Claudia," he said, his voice low, urgent. "I need to ask you something." I turned, wary. "What?" His eyes flicked toward my purse, where my notebook peeked out. "That book you keep, the papers, the meetings with that lawyer, what's going on?" I held his gaze, calm. "Planning." "Planning what?" he pressed. "Planning for a future you'll never touch." His face drained of color. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said softly, "that while you were chasing illusions, I was building something real. And you're only just now realizing it." His mouth opened, but no words came. He looked like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, finally seeing the drop beneath him. Before he could respond, Soraya arrived. Her heels sank into the grass, her dress too tight for the summer heat, sweat beading at her temple. She slipped her arm through Leonard's possessively, her smile brittle. "There you are," she said sharply. Her eyes landed on me. "Still hanging around, Claudia?" I folded my arms. "Still trying too hard, Soraya?" Her face flushed, her grip on Leonard tightening. "At least I have him." "For now," I said. The words struck like a slap. She staggered for a moment, then snapped, "You're pathetic." I smiled faintly. "And yet you're the one trembling." The crowd around us had grown quiet, ears straining. Soraya's eyes darted, her mask cracking. Leonard muttered something under his breath, tugging her away, but not before I saw it in his face. Confusion, suspicion, fear. That evening he came to May's porch again. He looked haggard, his voice rough. "Tell me the truth, Claudia," he said. "What are you hiding?" I sipped my tea, keeping my tone calm. "I'm not hiding. I'm preparing." "For what?" His voice cracked. "For the day when silence ends," I replied. He ran a hand over his face, pacing. "You've changed." "No," I said quietly. "I've just stopped shrinking." He stopped pacing, staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. And maybe he was. Meanwhile, Soraya was coming undone. At the pharmacy, she shouted at the clerk, demanding her prescription. At the salon, she snapped at the stylist, accusing her of cutting her hair unevenly. And at the grocery store, she broke down in the aisle, Leonard dragging her out as onlookers whispered. The queen was crumbling, and the town was watching. That night, as I wrote in my notebook, I thought about the years I had spent hiding my empire, my strength, my truth. And I realized something. The more Soraya fought to hold on, the more I simply had to stand still. Because soon, very soon, Leonard Harris was going to learn just how much power I had kept hidden, and when he did, it wouldn't just shake him, it would shatter him. The first sign came at the school board meeting. I was seated near the front, taking notes, when the chairwoman announced that the treasurer had fallen ill and someone needed to step in temporarily. Before I could think, May's hand shot up. "Claudia Monroe will do it." The room murmured in agreement before I could protest. And just like that, I was back in a role I hadn't touched in years, handling figures, balancing accounts, eyes scanning every line of numbers like they were second nature. I felt Leonard watching me from the back row. His gaze lingered on my steady hands, the calm way I spoke about budgets and funding. He looked unsettled, like a man realizing he'd misjudged the ground beneath him. After the meeting, he caught up with me in the hallway. "You were good in there," he said, almost grudgingly. I shrugged. Numbers have always made sense to me. His brow furrowed. "Always? Since when?" I met his eyes, calm. "Since before you cared to notice." His lips parted, but no words came. And in that silence, I could feel the wall between us shifting, just slightly, but enough for the truth to start seeping through. Soraya, meanwhile, was unraveling faster than anyone could contain. At the market, she accused a cashier of short-changing her, shouting until the manager had to intervene. At the church potluck, she stormed out in tears when someone joked about her always keeping Leonard on a leash. But the worst came one humid evening at the diner. She marched in, her lipstick smudged, her hair unkempt, dragging Leonard behind her. She spotted me at a booth with May and Vivian and stormed over. "You think you're so superior, Claudia," she spat, her voice trembling, parading around, acting strong, making people pity you. The room fell silent. Forks paused midair. I set down my glass calmly. "I don't want pity, Soraya, and I don't need superiority. I just have peace." Her eyes blazed. "Peace?" She let out a bitter laugh. "Peace doesn't keep a man warm at night." May's voice cut in, low and sharp. "Neither does poison." The words landed like a stone. Soraya's face went white. Leonard froze beside her, his jaw tightening, and the diner erupted in whispers. Soraya fled before Leonard could stop her, the bell above the door jangling violently. That night, Leonard came to May's porch again. He didn't sit. He just stood there, his fists clenched, his voice raw. "What do you know?" he demanded. I looked up from my notebook. "About what?" "About her. About Soraya." "About everything." I closed the notebook slowly. "More than you're ready to hear." His breath hitched. "Damn it, Claudia, stop talking in riddles. I see you, meeting lawyers, flipping through numbers like you're running a company. And now this calm you carry, like nothing touches you. What are you hiding from me?" I stood, stepping close enough that he had to meet my eyes. "I'm not hiding, Leonard. I'm waiting." "For what?" he whispered. "For the right moment," I said. "And when it comes, you'll understand everything you threw away." He staggered back like I'd struck him, his face pale, and without another word, he left. The power shift was almost complete. Soraya was spiraling into public disgrace. Leonard was grasping at truths he couldn't yet reach. And me? I was steady, patient, ready, because soon, very soon, the silence would break. And when it did, it wouldn't just be a whisper. It would be an earthquake. Some truths don't creep out in whispers. They detonate. The church hall was packed that night for the quarterly town meeting. Neighbors squeezed into folding chairs. Children fidgeted at their parents' feet. The air smelled of paper, ink, and summer sweat. I sat near the front, my notebook in my lap, calm as stone. And then the storm blew in. Soraya Delgado. She swept through the doors in a crimson dress that clung too tight, her hair wild, her smile brittle. Leonard trailed behind her, looking hollowed, his eyes darting like a man searching for escape. All eyes turned as they made their entrance. Whispers buzzed. She strutted straight to the front row, pulling Leonard down beside her. But even as she sat, her legs trembled, her hands twitching. The Queen was unraveling in public. The meeting droned on about budgets and zoning, but no one was listening. Everyone was watching Soraya. Finally, during open discussion, she stood. "I'd like to say something," she announced, her voice too loud, her accent sharp. "There's been talk about me, about Leonard, about lies." The room went still. She clutched the edge of the podium, her knuckles white. "Yes, I go to the doctor. Yes, I take medicine. But that doesn't make me weak. That doesn't make me unworthy." Her voice cracked. "I'm the one he chose." Gasps rippled. Leonard's face went red, his hand reaching for her arm. "Sit down, Soraya," he muttered. But she shook him off, her eyes wild. "No, they need to hear it. They need to know that she—" Her eyes locked on me, burning. "That Claudia is nothing but a bitter woman trying to tear us down." The silence was thunderous. I rose slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. The whole room turned. I walked to the podium, every step deliberate, every breath steady. Soraya's glare followed me, Leonard's eyes wide with dread. When I reached the microphone, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I have been silent long enough," I said. The room leaned in. I was left in the rain, my belongings scattered, my dignity trampled. I was told I was nothing, and I endured. My voice steadied, stronger now. But while they laughed, while they flaunted, I was building. Year after year, page after page, I built. I pulled my notebook from my bag and set it on the podium with a thud. "This," I said, "is not a diary. It's an empire." Gasps rippled through the hall. Leonard's face drained of color. I looked straight at him. $800 million, Leonard. That's what I've built. Quietly, patiently, without you, without her. While you were chasing illusions, I was creating reality. The room erupted in murmurs, shock buzzing like electricity. Soraya's mouth fell open, her hands trembling. You're lying." I met her gaze, unflinching. "Am I? Then why do lawyers know my name? Why do banks open their doors when I walk in? Why do men twice your age listen when I speak of numbers?" Her face crumpled. Leonard staggered to his feet, his voice hoarse. "Claudia, 800 million? I nodded once. "And not a cent of it is yours." The room gasped again. For a long moment, no one moved. Soraya's chest heaved, Leonard's hands shook, the crowd buzzed in disbelief. Finally, I stepped back from the podium. "You wanted me broken," I said softly, "but broken things shine sharper in the light, and I will never shrink again." The applause began in a ripple, then it swelled, steady, fierce. I walked back to my seat, my head high, and in that moment, the balance of power shifted forever. Leonard Harris knew the truth now. Soraya Delgado's mask was shattered, and Claudia Monroe was no longer just surviving. She was reigning. Secrets once spoken can't be unsaid. And in the silence after my words, I saw it, the fire I'd lit in Leonard's eyes. Not admiration, not regret, rage. He shoved past Soraya, stumbling toward the podium. 800 million? His voice cracked through the hall. "You sat beside me for years, acting small, acting ordinary. While you hoarded that?" The room buzzed, uneasy. "You lied to me," Leonard roared. His hand slammed the podium, rattling the microphone. "You made a fool of me." I stood slowly, my voice calm. "I never lied. I never hid. You just never asked." Gasps rippled. Leonard's face twisted, his pride bleeding out in front of everyone. "You think this makes you better than me?" he spat. "You think money makes you strong?" I met his glare, unflinching. "No, Leonard. Choices make you strong, and I chose to build while you chose to destroy." The hall was silent except for his ragged breathing. Soraya staggered to her feet then, her face pale, her hands trembling. "She's lying!" she cried, her voice shrill. "Claudia is nothing but a bitter woman spinning stories." Her words cracked, her body swaying. Leonard reached to steady her, but she jerked away. "Don't touch me!" The room recoiled. Whispers hissed. "She looks sick. She's falling apart. Did you hear about the clinic?" Soraya clutched the podium, her lipstick smeared, her eyes wild. "He chose me! Not her! Me!" And then her knees buckled. Leonard caught her just before she hit the floor, dragging her toward the door as murmurs swelled into a storm. The queen had fallen. When the doors closed behind them, the hall erupted, voices buzzing, chairs scraping, people crowding toward me with questions. But I couldn't hear them. My ears rang with the echo of my own words. 800 million. For years it had been my secret fortress. Now it was public. And though it felt like victory, it also felt like loss, like a piece of myself I'd never get back. May found me, her hand steady on my arm. "You did what you had to, baby," she whispered. I nodded, but my chest ached, because in burning Leonard and Soraya down, I had burned the last remnants of my old life too. Later that night, I sat on May's porch with my notebook. The numbers stared back at me, steady, unchanging, while my hands shook. Vivian lowered herself into the chair beside me. "You look like you buried someone," she said gently. "In a way, I did," I whispered. "I buried the woman who kept secrets, who stayed quiet. She's gone now." Vivian nodded slowly. "And in her place?" I closed the notebook. "A woman they can't ignore. But I don't know if I like her yet." Across town, Leonard sat by Soraya's bedside, his face hollow. She tossed and turned, her skin clammy, her whispers fevered. "You'll stay, won't you?" she mumbled. "You'll stay, even if—" Leonard's hands clenched. He didn't answer, because for the first time, he wasn't sure if he could. The shatter point wasn't just theirs. It was mine, too. I had broken them. But in doing so, I had broken the silence I once used to survive. And nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after the meeting, the town felt different. At the grocer's, heads turned as I walked in. Some nodded respectfully, others whispered. Not pity anymore, not curiosity. Something sharper, recognition. I had been invisible for so long. Now, I was unavoidable. Leonard, though, wasn't handling it the same. He stormed into the diner midweek, his voice loud enough to silence the room. "You think she's a saint?" he barked, pointing toward me where I sat with May. "She lied to me for years, kept her millions hidden while I worked myself to the bone. And you're all applauding her?" Murmurs rippled, but no one rushed to his defense. I stood slowly, meeting his glare. "You didn't work yourself to the bone, Leonard. You worked just enough to stay comfortable. And you never once asked about the notebooks on my desk, the meetings I slipped away to, the hours I spent building something from nothing." His face reddened, his chest heaving. "You made me look like a fool." "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." The silence that followed was suffocating. Leonard's fists clenched, but instead of striking, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. And the whispers began again. She's right. He always underestimated her. Now he's paying for it. Soraya didn't show her face for days. When she finally appeared, she looked like a ghost of herself. Gaunt cheeks, trembling hands, makeup failing to mask the illness eating her from the inside. She tried to smile, but it cracked at the edges. People stepped back when she reached for them, their eyes wary. At the pharmacy, I overheard the clerk whisper after she left. "It's true. She gave it to him, to Leonard. They'll both be living with it now." The words hung heavy, not with cruelty, but with inevitability. Soraya Delgado's reign of glamour had ended, and all that was left was ruin. One evening, Leonard showed up on May's porch again. His shoulders sagged, his face lined with exhaustion. "Do you hate me, Claudia?" he asked, his voice raw. I studied him, the man I once loved, now reduced to ashes of himself. "I don't hate you," I said softly. "I pity you." He flinched, his hands trembling. "I don't want your pity." "Then stop living like a man who needs it," I replied. Silence stretched. He stared at me, searching, desperate. "You really have it? The money?" "Yes." "All this time?" "Yes." His breath hitched, his pride crumbling. "And you never told me." "Because you never cared enough to see," I said. His eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them away, his jaw hardening. "You'll regret throwing it in my face." I shook my head. "No, Leonard. I'll only regret ever letting you close enough to think you could break me." He turned and left, his footsteps heavy in the night. That night, I sat with May and Vivian on the porch. The cicadas hummed, the air thick with the smell of honeysuckle. "You burned him down," Vivian said quietly. "No," I replied. "I revealed him. He burned himself down." May patted my hand. "And you, baby? How you feeling?" I stared into the dark. Like I buried someone. Not just Leonard, not just Soraya, but the Claudia who kept her power hidden. Vivian sipped her tea. "Then maybe it's time you meet the Claudia who doesn't hide." The shatter point was complete. Leonard's pride was rubble. Soraya's mask was dust. And me? I was standing in the ruins, holding the crown I never thought I'd wear. But wearing a crown means carrying its weight, and I was only just beginning to feel how heavy it could be. After a storm, there is silence. But silence does not always mean peace. Sometimes it means reckoning. The town had moved on quickly from the spectacle of my revelation. Or at least, they pretended to. On the surface, life went back to casseroles, Sunday services, and small talk at the grocer's. But under that surface, something had shifted. People stepped aside for me now, not out of pity, but out of respect. Some smiled too brightly, eager to be seen in my orbit. Others whispered when they thought I couldn't hear, "She's the one with the fortune. She outlasted them. She's untouchable now." It should have felt like triumph. Instead, it felt like standing on a mountaintop with no one beside me. Leonard was quieter now, too. I saw him at the hardware store, hunched over, moving slowly. His face was pale, his body thinner, his eyes hollow. When he noticed me, he didn't sneer or lash out. He just nodded, a shadow of the man he once was. Later that week, he came to May's porch again. But this time, he didn't ask to come inside. He just stood at the bottom of the steps, his voice raw. "I don't know how to live with this," he said. "With what?" I asked. "Knowing I threw away the only thing that mattered," his voice cracked. "You." My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. "Leonard, you didn't throw me away. You revealed yourself, and now you're living with that truth." He nodded slowly, tears shining in his eyes. Then he turned and walked into the night. I didn't call after him. Soraya, meanwhile, had vanished from public life. People said she rarely left the house anymore, that she drew the curtains tight, refused visitors, and snapped at Leonard when he tried to leave her side. "She looks sick," the whispers said. "She's not the same woman who came strutting in here." "She's finished." And maybe she was. I thought about her sometimes, alone in that house she'd claimed, clutching jewels and dresses that no longer dazzled anyone. I wondered if she still believed she'd won, or if she finally realized that what she'd taken was poisoned from the start. At night, I sat with my notebook, the pages filled with numbers, projections, plans. 800 million, more than enough to buy silence, respect, freedom. But as the cicadas hummed outside May's window, I felt the weight of it pressing on me. What good is a fortune if it builds walls instead of bridges? What good is survival if it costs you the softness of your own heart? One evening, May found me staring at the notebook, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. "You got everything now," she said softly. "The power, the respect, the money. But baby, what's it worth if it don't bring you peace?" I closed the book. "I don't know anymore." She cupped my face, her eyes fierce. "Then you better figure it out, because standing on top of the mountain ain't the same as living." That night, I dreamed of my younger self, the girl scribbling notes in a shabby apartment, hungry and determined. She looked at me with wide eyes. "Did we make it?" she asked. "Yes," I whispered. "We made it." "Then why do you look so sad?" I woke with tears on my pillow. The silence of it wasn't just mine. It was Leonard's, too. He stopped showing up at the diner, stopped strutting through town, stopped defending Soraya. Instead, I saw him once, alone on a bench near the park, his shoulders slumped, his hands shaking. He didn't see me, and I didn't go to him. But something about the sight lingered. The man who once thought himself a king now looked like a beggar searching for scraps of dignity. And Soraya? Soraya was a ghost now, a whisper of perfume on an empty street, a shadow behind curtains, a cautionary tale spoken in hushed tones. But even ghosts have ways of haunting, because her absence left Leonard with nothing but silence, and silence has a way of forcing choices. Me? I sat in the middle of it all, holding my crown, holding my fortune, holding my scars. And I knew the next step wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about deciding what kind of life I wanted to live, alone on the mountain, or daring to reach for something more. Pride is a heavy crown. Wear it too long, and it crushes you. I was starting to feel the weight. The town saw me as unshakable now. People nodded when I passed, smiled with respect, spoke my name with reverence. But when the house was quiet, when May was asleep and Vivian had gone home, I sat with my notebook and felt hollow. $800 million. Power, freedom, survival. And yet, some nights I wept into my hands, mourning not Leonard, not even Soraya, but the softer version of myself I had buried to survive. Leonard, too, was wrestling with his ghosts. I saw him less in public, no more outbursts at the diner, no more arguments on the street. He looked smaller now, as if shame itself had whittled him down. One evening, I found him sitting on the steps of the church, his head in his hands. He didn't notice me until I spoke. "You'll catch a chill out here." He looked up, startled. His eyes were rimmed with red, his face gaunt. "Claudia." I hesitated, then sat on the step across from him, the distance between us wide but not infinite. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I don't even know if I can." "Some things can't be fixed," I said softly. "They can only be faced." He swallowed hard, his hands trembling. I was blind. To you, to myself, to everything. For a moment, silence stretched between us, heavy with things unsaid. Then I rose. "When you're ready to face it, Leonard, you'll know where to find me." I left him there, under the cross, staring into the night like a man at war with himself. Soraya, meanwhile, had collapsed completely. She stopped showing her face in town. The curtains at Leonard's house stayed drawn, the yard overgrown. Whispers spread. Her infection was worse than people thought. Her temper had turned violent, her paranoia unbearable. She won't let him leave the house. She screams at him for hours. She's finished. And maybe she was, because by then, Leonard had stopped defending her altogether. At May's table one night, Vivian studied me over her teacup. "You ever think about letting him back in?" she asked carefully. I stiffened. "Why would I?" "Because sometimes victory feels hollow without someone to share it with," she said. May snorted. "Don't push her, Vivian." "That man dug his own grave." Vivian shrugged. "Maybe so, but graves can teach the living too." I said nothing, but her words lingered. Later that night, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, strong, untouchable, crowned in survival. But my eyes betrayed me. They looked tired, lonely. I whispered to my reflection, "What good is a crown if it keeps you alone?" The woman in the mirror didn't answer. Days later, Leonard appeared on May's porch again. He looked worse than ever, thinner, weaker, trembling. "Claudia," he whispered, "I left her." The words hit me like a stone. "She's sick. She's angry. She's destroying us both. I couldn't stay anymore." His voice broke. "But I don't know where else to go." I studied him, my chest tight. He wasn't the proud man who had thrown me out into the rain. He was a broken man, humbled by ruin. "You go inward first," I said gently. "You face yourself before you come knocking on anyone else's door." Tears slipped down his cheeks. "I don't deserve your kindness." "You don't," I said softly. "But kindness isn't about deserving." For the first time in months, he wept openly. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel only anger. I felt the faintest stirrings of something else. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. That night, I closed my notebook. For once, I didn't write numbers. I didn't plan investments. I just sat in the quiet and let myself feel. Because maybe May was right. Maybe standing on the mountain wasn't enough. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to decide whether I wanted to climb down, and who, if anyone, I might reach for when I did. The end of a story never arrives all at once. It creeps in, soft-footed, disguised as ordinary days. For weeks, the town buzzed with gossip about Leonard leaving Soraya. Some pitied him, some sneered, some wondered how long until he came crawling back to me. But I wasn't waiting. I filled my days with meetings, community work, the steady hum of business. My fortune no longer felt like a secret to guard, but a tool to wield. I funded scholarships, repaired the church roof, bought supplies for the shelter. People thanked me, praised me, smiled at me with admiration. But when night came, when the house grew quiet, I still felt the echo of emptiness. Because applause isn't the same as love. Leonard came again one evening. This time, he didn't stand on May's porch or linger at the bottom of the steps. He knocked. May answered, her face hard as stone. "You got nerve coming here again." "I know," he said, his voice low, "but I need to speak to her." May's eyes narrowed, but she turned and called my name. I stepped into the doorway, my arms crossed. "Leonard." "Claudia," he said, his voice rough. "Please." Something in his eyes stopped me from shutting the door, so I stepped outside. We sat on the porch, the cicadas singing in the trees. The air heavy with unspoken things. "I don't expect forgiveness," he began. "I don't even expect kindness. I need you to know I see it now. All of it. What I did, who I was, the damage I caused." I studied him. He looked smaller than ever, but not from shame alone, from honesty. "You see it," I said quietly. "But do you feel it?" His eyes filled with tears. "Every day, I wake up and I feel the weight of what I threw away, what I chose instead of you. And it's killing me." I turned my gaze toward the dark horizon. "It's not about what you lost, Leonard. It's about what you destroyed. You didn't just leave me. You tried to erase me, and you can't undo that." He bowed his head, silent. For a long while, we sat in quiet, the night pressing around us. Finally, he whispered, "If I could go back." "You can't," I said sharply, "and I wouldn't let you." He flinched, then I softened. "But you can move forward, not with me, not yet, maybe not ever, but with yourself. You can stop being the man who destroyed and start being the man who learns." He looked at me then, his eyes shining with something I hadn't seen in years. Humility. The silence stretched again, but it wasn't suffocating this time. It was fragile, tentative. Finally, I rose. "I'm not promising you anything, Leonard. Not forgiveness, not love, not even friendship. But I'm not slamming the door shut either. If you want to prove you can change, the path is yours to walk." His breath caught. "Claudia," I held up a hand. Don't say it, not yet. Words are easy. Show me. And with that, I turned and went inside, leaving him alone on the porch, under the stars. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at my notebook. For once, the numbers didn't matter, because I realized this wasn't about money anymore. It was about choice. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the stirrings of something I thought I'd buried forever. Not love, not yet, but hope. The story began with rain. It only felt right that it ended with sunlight. Weeks passed after that porch conversation. Leonard kept his distance. No late-night visits, no outbursts in town, no begging at my door. Instead, I began hearing things. Quiet things. He started showing up at the church, not to posture, but to help. Fixing pews, carrying boxes, sweeping floors after services. He volunteered at the shelter too, patching walls, serving food. May noticed, and she told me without commentary, though the gleam in her eye said plenty. The town noticed too. People whispered, but not with mockery this time, with curiosity. Maybe he's changing. Maybe it's real. I didn't know yet, but I was watching. One Saturday morning, I stood outside the community center, overseeing the delivery of supplies I'd funded. Children laughed nearby, chasing each other in the sun. Leonard was there, hauling crates. His shirt clung with sweat, his hands blistered, but he didn't complain. He didn't even look for me. That's what struck me most. He wasn't performing, he was just doing. For the first time in years, I saw a man instead of a shadow. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel only anger when I looked at him. That evening, he approached me as I was leaving. "Claudia." His voice was quiet, steady. I turned, waiting. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "I'm not even asking for a second chance. I wanted you to know I'm trying. Not for you, for me. Because I don't want to die the man I was." I studied him, searching for cracks, for the old arrogance, but it wasn't there. Only humility. Slowly I nodded. "Then keep trying." He smiled faintly, and for the first time in a long time, it reached his eyes. The next week, I found myself on May's porch again, notebook in hand, but I wasn't writing numbers this time. I was writing words, memories, lessons, stories. I realized I wasn't just building an empire. I was building a legacy. And legacies aren't measured only in money. They're measured in what we leave behind for others to grow from. One evening Leonard came again. This time he carried nothing but a folded blanket. He laid it gently on the porch at my feet. "What's this?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "It's yours, the one I threw into the rain that night. I found it in the attic." The sight of it, the faded fabric, the frayed edges, hit me like a wave. Memories of that night, the cold, the shame, the loneliness. But here it was, returned, not as an insult, as an offering. My throat tightened. "Why bring it back now?" "Because I can't undo what I did," he whispered. "But I can start by returning what never should have been taken." Tears filled my eyes. I reached down, touched the blanket, then looked at him. "I don't know where this goes," I admitted, "but I know this. You're not the man who threw me into the rain anymore, and I'm not the woman who cried at his feet." We stood in silence, the sun setting behind us, painting the sky in gold. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like distance. It felt like possibility. Weeks later, we walked together down the street during the Harvest Festival. Not as lovers, not yet, but as two people no longer defined by betrayal and bitterness. Children ran past us, laughter echoing. Music floated from the square. People smiled, some whispering, some nodding. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The story that began with belonging scattered in the rain ended with something far greater than survival. It ended with reclamation, with dignity, with the possibility of love, not the naive love of the past, but the hard-earned, weathered kind that grows after storms. As we stood beneath the festival lights, Leonard turned to me, his eyes steady. Claudia, may I walk beside you? I smiled, the weight of my crown lighter now. Yes, Leonard, you may. And just like that, what was broken became something new, not perfect, not flawless, but whole, at last. And listen, if you've stayed with me all the way through Claudia's journey, through Leonard's betrayal, Soraya's scheming, May's sharp wisdom, Vivian's loyal fire, and that jaw-dropping moment when a woman they thought broken stood tall and revealed an 800-miler empire, you can't walk away without hitting subscribe. And if you sat here, heart-pounding, waiting to see if Claudia would shrink or stand, if you stayed with me through the betrayal, the Shatterpoint, and the rebuilding, then you're ready for what's coming next. There are 2 videos on the screen with very interesting storylines that I'm sure you can relate to. I need you to go check it out. Click the video on your screen now to watch them.